The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Good morning and good evening, everyone. This is the Agile Coaching Network. The Agile Coaching Network, if you're not familiar with what it is, we've been actually getting together for well over 4 years. 4 years in public, I guess. Before that, we were getting together in a corporation in this particular pattern or this particular format, evolved out of what was being done in a Fortune 100 company. And after I left that Fortune 100 company, I thought this actually works for the greater Agile community. So I will take it outside and do a podcast and do a live event and get a great group of people together on this kind of virtual park bench that we're sitting on today. This is brought to you by the Agile Alliance. If you're not familiar with who the Agile Alliance is, it is a nonprofit organization that's been here since the dawn of the manifesto. And it sounds sort of like 2001: A Space Odyssey type of thing, where throwing the bone in the air as we're suddenly, going off. And with this being the 20th anniversary of Agile, I think it's really cool that we're still have momentum going with the mission. Agile Alliance does have a mission to go make work a better thing for the world. And it's, we're doing that, of course, with the Agile principles and values. But I just want to point out, because, number one, last year, I don't typically go into kind of the details of an organization, that does support for us. But I do want to go point out in particular that I need you to go to agilealliance.org and become one of these supporting members. If you look at last year, the way that the revenue works for the Agile Alliance, it comes from sponsors and membership, and most of it comes from sponsors from the big event that we do every year, which is where we do the big Agile conference, and we get a bunch of great people together for a week. And one of the artifacts of that, of course, is an operating budget for the organization. Since we are a nonprofit, you're welcome to go look at the budget and the results from last year, and you will see a big old negative on there. And part of the reason for that is we couldn't run our event last year because of COVID. And the way that we are operating and the way that this particular podcast and this particular event gets funded is by membership right now. It's 100% of the operating revenue of the organization. And like I said, I don't typically go and do that big reach out and say, hey, go, become a member. I don't try to beat people over the head with membership, but please go to agilealliance.org. And if you can afford the $49 a year for the membership as an individual, or if your corporation would like to come in like some of these cornerstone members here, which are at the highest tier of support for the organization and its mission, please become like a Liberty Mutual, an Intel, an HP, or a Lockheed Martin, because those are the people who are helping us. Want you to please step in and become a member of that. If you want to have any questions about what membership does for you, you can always contact me directly. I'm always available to have that conversation. There are some production delays, and I want to apologize, because if you joined last month and I had some emails saying, Ray, where's the podcast from the last episode? Unfortunately, I have some family events that are going on right now, which is I have a family member who has cancer, and we've had surgery and other things that were taking place this month, and it just put me behind on everything. So I apologize for that. We are supported by a group of, these starting panelists. That's easy for me to say. The starting group of panelists that are here today. Not everyone shows up every single time, but it looks like we got almost everyone here. So Shauna's here, Hendrik, Jorg, also Deanna, and myself. Linda's not here this month, but wherever she's at, Linda, if you're listening, we want you to come back onto the panel. We would love to have you here. But what they do is they help to get the conversation started on this park bench. The goal of this is to give back to the community that supported all of us. Lastly, this is to help others, amplify your learning, and absolutely have fun. this is one of the times if I think of my month, this is something that I can't miss. It's just, I enjoy the interactions with the group, the people, the community, and this is literally a worldwide community. There are some people on this call today who are up in the middle of the night. Thank you. That's why when I open the show, I always say good morning and good evening, because some people are actually, I should say, good early morning or good late evening for some of the people. I really appreciate it. I really appreciate you coming up and actually joining us and being a part of the conversation. So with that, it was a little bit longer-winded opening, but let's go ahead and kick this off with the first question. I was on a panel discussion on the Reflect the Agile 2020 or the 20th year anniversary. Hopefully I didn't botch it. I think it's Reflect 2020 or Reflect 20 event. And there was individuals, we had a fairly broad set of skills and individuals that were on this panel. And you can go listen to it. But there was one of the Agile Manifesto authors that was on this panel, and he alluded that programmers have been left behind, that the Agile movement seems to have moved into the management circle versus it being a thing that we do as a programmer or as an engineer in general. And I found that quite interesting for a couple of reasons. Number one, I am an engineer by training. I'm an electrical engineer, but I have to say that I never did transmission line theory and other things like that. I actually started writing code for doing semiconductors. And if anyone has ever been in the semiconductor space, you know that you actually write a form of C code that compiles to a semiconductor, which is kind of all fun and cool and stuff, but it was code. Even as an electrical engineer, I still had some of my electrical engineering things that I had to do in my system engineer things, but it was code. And so when I started using Agile practices, I was using them in a coding environment. And then as a manager and eventually as a senior leader within a big company, I still had that Agile mindset, because some of the Agile mindset is about communications. It's about how we interact as a group. And I'm not going to go read through all of these, but if you look at the 12 principles and if you look at the Agile Manifesto itself, it talks a lot about how we do work together, not just about the programmer in particular. So my opening question is number one, why do programmers, if you're a programmer, I would definitely want you to raise your hand and let me know this, or if you have a perspective about a programmer on this, why do you feel that they've been left behind in the Agile movement as it's moved through the 20 years? And then the next one is, I find it unacceptable, and how the heck do we fix it? I would like to fix this thing if this is the perception that is currently out there. And Shauna, do you want to take a jab at this? Or jab's probably a wrong word. You want to take a first stab? Sure. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that I'm seeing in that I see as a pattern in organizations is, number one, I find that there's a lot of specialists. So if a typical Agile team, let's say, has 7 to 9 people, and each person is like, you have a front-end engineer, a back-end engineer, an iOS engineer, an Android engineer, maybe you have an SME. What ends up happening is that there isn't any working together. It's like, well, this person can only take this kind of work. And so then when you get to things like the stand-ups end up not mattering because they're only working on their thing. So it becomes like a status report to the manager. And I think that this is an example of how do we get people working more together, increasing the level of, or I don't want to say increasing, but training more cross-functionally so that the team can swarm and work together. I think that a lot of times when we try to keep teams small and yet we have it single-threaded, we end up really doing a disservice to our engineering teams who would like to work together, who would like to partner, but just don't have the opportunity because of simply how the teams are structured. So I think that's the first thing. The other thing, especially I think in times of COVID, there's a lot of talk about not having enough thinking time, or not being able to solve problems that we really need to, that truly are important, but maybe they're more technical in nature. So, they're not meeting the business bottom line. And I think that giving engineers kind of that, you hear 10% time or the ability to work together and swarm on problems, doesn't necessarily fit Agile frameworks. And so I think that those are the kinds of things that I hear about. In terms of solving for those things, I think it's really important when we talk about autonomy for engineers, being able to allow them to give that space and to truly work as a team and to figure out how we can better align our teams to work together. That's how we can support our teams as more, I guess, if you want to say management or leaders in the company.
Awesome. Thank you for that perspective. Jorg, what about you? What do you have on this?
Yeah, so I'm an electrical engineer by education as well, but I focused on software already during my studies, so I can relate definitely to that. And my thoughts are multiple. So one thing is definitely that a lot of people still look a lot on more the cadence of output and the customer benefit than on detecting better ways to deliver software. So that learning is more geared to what we're used to, getting faster, but actually not always getting more effective in the way we do things. And that requires experimentation. And I think still, as we're focused so much on products and things, really the technical skill, the craftsmanship sometimes gets lost, especially in the discussions, because if you're doing things in a sprint and one sprint after the other, you're actually getting good at this, and then you take too little time to really reflect on how you do this. And I think that's a bit the thing people fear. They're really getting good at doing things, but how to get better. That's like if you're good at sports, how to get really great is something different. So you need to really take a big loop, and we're in a lot of small loops probably in a lot of places, because that requires quite some stepping back.
Right. It's interesting because Simon on the chat line here, he says that nobody really wants to admit it takes a different set of technical skills to work in an agile team. And I do agree with you on that, Simon, because I think the one thing coming from, again, sort of geeking out a bit here, but I started off as a Modula 2, and then off to Pascal, and then after that to C, and then to C++. And I know my increment from C to C++ and trying to use like polymorphic systems and everything else, I found that I was still programming like a C programmer, and I was not programming and using inheritance well. I wasn't using all those things, and I really just needed to retrain myself or retrain my brain on how to go do that more effectively. So yeah, I totally agree with you on that comment. Deanna, how about you?
There's a couple of things that come to mind for me. And when I first started hearing these comments was in the context of events, conferences, meetup groups, those kinds of things. And that they had become overrun with the concerns of Scrum Masters and then later on Agile coaches, or people who were concerned about how Agile fit into the broader organization and things like that, and that there just wasn't any time or any space for technical topics, for instance. And I think and I think that perception has persisted, even though there, at least like in our local meetup group at Agile PDX a number of years ago, we said we want to do a third. We want to make sure that a third of our topics are kind of broad organizational and coaching kind of topics, a third are on test and quality, and a third are more technical. And I know the Agile Manifest or the Agile Alliance while I was on the board, made the adjustment by saying, well, yes, we've heard that about the big Agile conference. We want to make sure that we always have a technical track or more than one technical track at the Agile conference. And we're going to start doing this separate conference, Deliver Agile, that is specifically looking at issues that of concern to programmers and or development team members. And so I think, there's some part of this that's a bit of a leftover, because there was a period of years where that shift happened, where Scrum really became quite big. And so the needs of product owners and Scrum masters sort of overwhelmed the needs of everybody else in terms of conferences. And of course, those two groups of people, I'm going to make a gross generalization here. Those two groups of people speak more easily about these kinds of things. A gross generalization, and I know that. But I think that was a piece of it too. And then the other thing that I have to kind of put in here is that Agile is a very inclusive way of working. And I think there are still programmers out there who were very, very comfortable in their bro programmer culture and feel uncomfortable with the shift to an awareness that more diverse teams actually produce better, and that some companies are doing a more or less good job of reaching out to bringing in other folks. And I think that's another piece of it. This whole idea that the Agile Manifesto was really a lot focused on how to make things better for individuals and their interactions. That is the very first value, right? And how do we make that a more inclusive set of individuals and interactions, I think has left some programmers feeling not entirely comfortable. Right. So, and that, I don't know how to fix that, other than by people just beginning to have more experiences with each other. I don't know. It could be that the balance between product folks and the folks who are in the sort of coaching or Scrum Master roles, have an inordinate say in what goes on. And I was just reading James Shore's the drafts that James Shore is putting out for the second edition of his book, and I just read the part about business people, product managers, product owners, whatever title we give them, need to have the leeway to make the decisions about what's going to be the next most valuable thing for the business, for the team to work on. And the development team members need to have the final say on what is technically important to include in order for security and all the other kinds of things that might be less visible to the business folks. And I think there may be some issues in there as well, where we went to whatever the product owner tells you is the right thing, to the extent that I visited teams that said, well, we have this product backlog, but as a team, we also have this secret technical backlog over here. And, and having conversations like, well, if you think that this thing that you need to include to make this better load bearing or more secure, do you think your product owner wouldn't be interested in that? And maybe there's a conversation that needs to be held there. But I do think that's emblematic of the way people feel that split. That some teams would think they need to have this sort of technical orphan backlog over here. Right. And the way to fix that is surface it, have conversations about the need for those things, and be able to talk with their business folks about, what impact leaving those things out may have on the product down the road. So anyway, I'll stop there. But those are the things that come to mind for me.
No, those are good points. I think,
Yeah.
I think you yielded towards the very first value itself, which is it's sort of, and I'm again, I am a programmer, so if I'm not meaning to offend by saying when your kids get quiet, you go check, because there might be some mischief going on. When my programmers get quiet as a manager, I tend to go and use individual interactions as a tool to understand what's there, what's going on. And so, yeah, the hidden stuff is, bring it to light, and then I think it goes much better. Hendrik, what about you?
A lot of good things have been said. I was thinking a bit about in how far has the manifesto let down the software developers, and maybe I was thinking when I entered into the scene, my actual software developer or programmer career was already some years old, and I had started to be a project manager and project office manager. So when I saw the Agile Manifesto, I was actually delighted, because for me as a project manager or project office manager, this made total sense. It's about people interacting with each other, getting results with working software. We need to collaborate with the customer because our product management is the only people talking to the customer. We need the customer closer to the developers. And then, of course, all this mess with change request procedures and so on. So to me, that's made a lot of sense. But now looking at this from this angle of this question, I think maybe it's more a manifesto for the project managers. So when I'm a software developer, I might see, okay, there is a promise here. There is a promise that I have a more sustainable pace, and now all this mess, I get more clarity on customer requirements and so on. But what has really happened was that Scrum came up as a mini project framework. And the promise there was having a sustainable pace, having more empowerment to the team. But what actually happened in many companies, I think, is that the sustainable pace was misused to drive up productivity. And that's even a marketing that you can see on the internet by Agile consultants, or I think even Jeff Sutherland is promising that you get twice the work in half the time and so on. And it fuels a narrative of productivity increase. And now what I've seen in a number of companies is that software development teams, the programmers, what's not on the backlog is not happening. So if there's no learning on the backlog, learning is not happening. Or you need to plan in a sprint where you are actually learning or innovating or just breathing and so on. So in the past, projects were always had a drama curve. In the beginning of the project, everybody was relaxed. The delivery date was so far in the future, a year from now maybe. And then usually towards the end of the project, there was a huge stress and hectic because we now found out that we are going to miss the deadline. Then the deadline was postponed a couple of times. Change requests were issued, exemption requests were issued, and finally you deliver after a super stressy couple of months, and then you relax again. The next project is starting a bit more relaxed. And these ups and downs, as bad as they were equalized now. Now we have a sustainable pace. We are running sprint after sprint after sprint after sprint after sprint. But then management, of course, sees this and say, okay, maybe we can push a little bit more here. So can we maybe drive up the productivity here by test automation, and we need to find ways how to produce even more stuff. And I think we succeeded with that, but I think the profession of software development is a bit left behind in the whole game. So that's just a couple of thoughts and observations I have around this.
Well, thank you for that. Lakshmiya?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I agree with all of the thoughts that have been shared so far. Last Friday, as a result of celebrating the 20 years of the Agile Manifesto, we had a lean coffee reflecting on what values and principles we're leaning towards as an organization. And it's so interesting that this topic came up because some of the engineers expressed that we're leaning so much towards being responsive to our customers that we're actually not going at a sustainable pace. We don't have enough time for learning and reflecting. And so that now has led to some interesting inquiries about what do we need to do to ask the team and create some space for them to figure out what do they need to succeed and have more time to think about architecture and make sure that they have the documentation in place to make sure the team is aligned. So, I really agree with everyone's thoughts, and we're actually going through this discovery right now in our organization to try to figure out what do we need to do to create that environment for where the team has a voice and that the team can really set the pace and we can listen.
That's awesome. And so what steps are you taking to do that? I'm kind of curious.
As a coach, I think just creating an awareness that they have the control to be able to set their own pace and look at their own data like cycle time and say, well, okay, well, am I doing too much? Am I learning every week? Am I creating some time for myself to grow? And what are we doing to create some shared learning time? You know, are you mob programming? Are you maybe fixing some bugs together or sharing stories about what successes you had in the week? I think there just needs to be more time for individual learning as well as team learning. So we're starting to explore that.
Good. Yeah. No, I think the mob programming thing is absolutely excellent. One of the things that for my own skill set, you know, when you go into management for a bit and then suddenly you want to go program again, mobbing is actually a really great place to kind of resharpen the pencil. And I can tell you that my pencil was really unsharp. So it was actually fun being involved, but there's also a heck of a lot of vulnerability when you're in a room with some really great programmers, and you just sometimes it just has, you know, as you know, you got to be vulnerable when you're stepping in to learn stuff. So thank you for your comments. Let's see, no problem. Salajay? What would be the best course of action if a programmer feels that this manifesto is great, but it's more for managers than it is for me as a programmer? What would you do? What steps would you take?
To be honest, I have seen programmers, developers who take the process very, light, because they think that technically they have lot of things to do, and they actually take a lot of time spending in meetings or retrospectives or in other meetings like daily stand-up and sprint planning, all these things. So it's all about reaching to one point that we all work together to deliver a product with good quality where we can reach our sprint goals. So I don't say all developers are like that, but their perspective about with teams I have worked, I have seen, and there are a lot of challenges for them to make understand or know how it is important to follow the Agile manifesto or the Agile values. Yeah, that's my opinion.
Okay. Well, thank you for all of that. I appreciate that. Abe.
Good evening, everyone. Yeah, based on the topic that we're discussing, I would say that most developers feel a little bit left behind with regards to Agile and Agile methodology and all that, because most times it's always the focus is normally on the product owners and the Scrum Masters going for training on how to improve our teams, but not including the developers most of the time on how to improve themselves and also improve the way they communicate and collaborate amongst themselves to deliver high quality solutions. And then another thing I realized is most product owners and Scrum Masters, we do have certain set of qualifications or training to help improve ourselves, but you rarely find such, for the programmers. But I think Scrum.org do have what's it called, certification for developers, to enable them really understand the importance of Agile in the software development environment. So it's aside from that, the other factor that I could relate this discussion to is that the programmers, they some of them are not fully trained on how Agile is really important to their development process, and if they're not really included in such discussions, they don't take ownership of what's going on, and they don't believe they need to adopt the Agile whilst working, because they had been performing well before the before Agile actually came into being, and hence they believe they can do without maybe using any of the Agile methodologies, and those are like critical factors, I think, is behind the way the programmers and maybe the development team are always they feel left behind by Agile.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your insights on that. One of the things that, to share is, and what we've noticed is from a coaching pattern perspective, is that if we provide the space, specifically, we used to run coding dojos that were every other week in this big company that I used to work for. And what we found is that people coming in and just learning the skills, practicing. And I think that sometimes we think that programming is something of an absolute. And as you know, we write the code for the first time, it's never perfect. And then we refactor that code and it gets better, and we refactor it again and it gets even better and more maintainable and more usable. And so if you look at a lot of the technical skills that we want to use, or the patterns that we use is in the programming and the engineering space, is about trying to go sometimes not to get it out the door the fastest, but to make it maintainable. And I think that one of the things that management, and I look at the manifesto as seeing this first artifact to say, hey, managers, we're people too, and let's go talk. Stop committing us to stuff when you need to have us in the conversation and we could tell you about it. So I think that it was the first portion of the conversation. I think the next portion of the conversation is, it's really complex to go deliver a product. And I don't care if it's software or if it's anything else. And those conversations are really required for us to be able to do our work. I mean, as far as the skills and making room for people to grow skills, like Hendrik said, make that time available for people. I'm going to go take a couple more questions and then we might pivot to one more question before the top of the hour. Rohit, what do you have?
Yeah, so I just wanted to add, I mean, it could be that while some programmers feel that Agile left them behind, could be that because they think they are doing Agile, but actually they are not, right? So organizations think, yeah, so we are Agile, we have some board, we do sprints, we do Kanban, we have some kind of boards, but the actual pillars of Agiles are not there in the organization. They still set deadlines, the unrealistic deadlines sometimes, to do some stuff, so there's no learning culture either. So that's why probably I could say, I can add my 2 cents saying, they think that Agile organizations are not Agile. That's why they feel that they have left it behind.
And I do agree with that. I wrote an article a number of years back about, if you think that Agile is not working, you might want to take a look at the fact that you might not be doing Agile at all. So I appreciate your comments. So let's go ahead and pivot over to the next question. So this one, Deanna, I see your name written all over this. I don't know why. But what do you do when the retrospective falls flat, but the team is improving, but not fast enough as they could? I find that kind of amusing, the little added, but they're not doing it as fast as they could. Deanna, do you have anything to add on this one?
Oh, heck no. Yeah, no. Yes, absolutely. And I am intrigued by that little ending clause or phrase or whatever grammar tells me that is. I would want to know, from whose point of view is the team not improving as fast as they could? I mean, in some ways, even the way we ask the question, the team isn't improving, but not as fast as they could. So are we regarding this group as a team, or are we regarding this group as just a collection of individual contributors, would be my first question.
Right.
But then, but more importantly, from whose point of view? The team is making improvements, and I'd also want to know where is this team in their sort of life cycle of being a team? And I'd also like to know a lot more about what is meant by retrospectives falling flat. And so I'm going to go with that one and say if retrospectives are falling flat, it's probably because they're not very engaging retrospective. The responsibility lies with the person who is putting the retrospective together to make it a meeting that is meaningful and that is, by example, if what you are doing is asking 2 or 3 questions and recording them into a Confluence sheet and then saying the retrospective is done, no wonder the team is improving slowly. They're not even getting a chance to agree on actions. As an example, I was invited into an organization one time to sit and watch their boundary meetings, their demo or sprint review, their retrospective, and their planning meeting. This happens from time to time. I get invited in to do this. And when I was sitting with the one of the teams that was doing a retrospective, I discovered that the Scrum Master and the product owner roles were in the same person, which is, a conflict of interest that it's got to be very difficult to manage. And they were co-located. They weren't even remote. So they all got into a room. The Scrum Master PO/PO popped open his laptop, put up on a screen in the conference room their Confluence page, said, let's fill in these 2 columns. What did we do well this time? And they wrote some things down, and I think it was just what would we like, what did we want to be different, or what could be improved? I think it was what could we improve, and they listed a bunch of things. And then he said, and are there any recognitions or appreciations anybody wants to give each other? I kind of gave him points for that, and they wrote down some things in another section on the Confluence page. And then he said, well, we still have time, and we've finished all the retrospective, so I'd like to talk about refining a few of the stories that are coming up. And at that point, I couldn't keep my mouth shut, and I said, excuse me, were you planning to have any action items come out of this, right? And through the whole thing, it had been pulling teeth for him to get the team members to say anything about what should be listed in those columns. And most of them were sitting leaning way back in their chairs with their arms crossed, looking more or less bored. And I don't blame them. Of course it was boring, and they were feeling like it was a waste of time, which it was. And so he said, oh, okay, yeah, well, what would you like to say? And I said, well, so on any of these things, on the things that went well or the things that you'd like to improve, are there any actions that you want to walk away taking, to keep the things that are going well, or to improve the things that are on that list? And he said, well, what do you mean? And the team members, exploded is probably too long big a word, but they just came alive. They were like, yeah, how, that thing that's on that list, we could, there's a few things we could do, and then that wouldn't show up again next week like it did last week, right? And they all started talking. All I had to do was make that little opening. And they all started talking, and they ended up walking out with 2 or 3 small improvement items. And afterwards, the Scrum Master PO came to me and he said, what just happened? And so then I had a little conversation with him about the point of a retrospective. It's not to check it off on your checklist of I've done all the things. I held a retrospective. It's about making room for the team to actually take some actions together to improve their lot in life or improve their the quality of their product or improve their work process or whatever it might be. But he had no idea. Retrospectives falling flat. Well, what kind of retrospectives are you doing? Team is improving. Well, where are they in their team life cycle? Maybe they're early on and the improvements should be small while they're kind of getting their feet under them. If it's happening later, then maybe to be concerned. But then also, who's deciding that they're not improving as fast as they could? Is that coming from the team, or is that coming from some external party who has no business even making that observation? So there, I'm done.
No, I fully agree with all that. I just, for some reason, when you were describing that scenario, I saw sort of like you saw those old ship, the ship movies in the 1930s where you've got all of the people chained to the oars in a boat. And I could see the person who's, who's cracking the whip, suddenly going, let's have a retrospective, shall we? How could we row better? And going through and there's are ways of improving that. But anyway, that's excellent story. Thank you for sharing that. I think, Jorg, I think your microphone lit up before. Do you have something to add?
Yeah. I would like to take a bit different perspective here and assume all the positive things like in the prime directive, that this question is asked by the team, so they are really in the point, or whoever is really as honest as possible. They really feel that they're not getting out of the retrospectives what they might want. And they feel that actually, yes, we're doing better, but that's not enough. And sometimes you have that feeling. And here I can only advise them to actually address this in their own retrospective. So make a retrospective on the retrospectives. Just take it as with learning, one level up. If you're not improving fast enough, look, what are you improving? What would be the next level? So challenge yourself on a different level, because you're probably just stuck in day-to-day work, and what you need to do is organizational change to really leverage this, or you're stuck up in software and you actually should be stuck up in the entire system or whatever to get better things done. So try that, and definitely try to get somebody to look at it from the outside. Get the creativity of other people to help you if you're feeling you're at a point where your training effect is slacking. And that's what definitely happens to everybody on a journey. Sometimes the hill is more steep than at other times. I try to take this positive.
The one thing that's always come through with you is always positive, which I appreciate.
I'm always trying.
So one thing about Jorg is he's always doing the Happy Friday and other things, which was always when I worked with him in that big Fortune 100 company, it always made my day feel better when he did that. Evelyn, are you there?
So this sparked a question on retrospectives and action items from retrospective, and I have them with my team. I'm a Scrum Master on a team, and recently we were asked to share our action items at a program level, and I'm curious it felt a little wrong, I guess, because I thought that was for the team to self-improve, and so I was curious the thoughts on sharing those action items across the organization.
Okay. Anyone on the panel want to take a stab at that?
Yep. I think you're exactly right. And but I think it is also okay for the team to have some action items. I don't know if you've ever used the circles in soup. There is a set of actions a team can take in terms of influencing what they need. And I think, if you're going into a meeting like that, it can be worthwhile to say to the team in their prior retrospective, I'm going to have an opportunity to talk about action items. What is it you would like me to request from the rest of the organization that would enable our work more? And I think those are appropriate things to carry into that kind of meeting. But the micromanaging of, well, what's the team decided to do for itself should only be talking about in generalities. Okay. You need to maintain the team's confidentiality there. And I think your instinct was absolutely right.
Thank you.
Cool. So
maybe to add just one sentence to that, because that's actually something I picked up from you, Ray, is make it a habit to define things like that as management asks. So what do we as a team want to ask from management? And if you then can take the loop back to think, is it actually what we need, or is that something we can do ourselves? That's pretty strong in moving the boundary and still getting that ask out, because it's very clear somebody has the topic and will take it to management. So there's nothing about confidentiality here. If they don't agree, if they don't find it, it's fine. But I've seen that actually they find a lot in the beginning and they take it all back. And then only the real essence remains if you get into that conversation. And very often it's that they think about the next team. Make sure that we enable the other teams around the organization. That's more of a management ask than anything else I've ever heard.
Thank you. It helps. That helps in twisting it around so that we can actually leverage that to the action item B. What is it that we need? Support on. So thank you.
It's awesome. So I just want to remind everyone that the next event is going to be on Friday, March 26th. That's when we meet up again. Also, the other things to go point out, if you go to agilealliance.org events, there's a number of different events that are coming up. I mean, we have the XP event that I think registration is either open or soon will be open. And then Agile 2021, which is, we're going to have to go do it virtual just because of currently where the pandemic is. But we are going to have, I think, a wonderful time. Brandon and the rest of the conference team are putting together, I think, a pretty good event where we can do some networking, learn some stuff, and hopefully walk away from that week with our brains totally full with all of the goodness that's going to be coming out of that. But you can all go to agilealliance.org, go to events, and you can see what are the things that are coming up. The last thing, and I promised this in December, and unfortunately with the family situation, I got behind. We're also going to be opening up the Agile Alliance Lounge, which is a virtual space where you can come and just network. Look for that being posted up on the events page. It'll be something where it's literally a space that you go into and you could just have, ad hoc conversations, or if you want to go take a corner of the space and run a lean coffee if you want to, you can. So we're currently finishing up looking at the different tools that are available for that, and they will become, hopefully it'll be a good online experience for us, because I really would like to go do more networking because I miss the little offline conversations, the less formality that sometimes are there. Again, I'd like to thank the regulars on this show. I could not do this without you. I would be here in a fetal position if I didn't have the love and support from all of you guys. So I really appreciate that. You guys all have a great month, and I hope to talk to you soon. This podcast is provided by Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.